Kazakhstan has struck at the Kremlin. Moscow is caught in a fuel trap. The gasoline empire of Putin is collapsing. The tap has been shut off, even in Moscow. Zelensky and Tokayev are also against Putin. This statement is blowing up the internet. The Kremlin is disrupting negotiations. What is the real reason? Europe is building a nuclear shield. It's the end for Putin. I'll tell you all the details in just a moment. Greetings. This is Ukraine. Today, I, Victoria Panchenko, bring you the latest events. Kazakhstan has gone against the Kremlin and put Moscow in a tough spot. The country has sharply reduced gasoline exports to Russia. Kazakhstan did this at the worst possible moment for Russia. They cut off the flow of fuel and triggered a new chain of the gasoline crisis, which is already paralyzing regions. Even occupied Crimea is feeling the effects. More precisely, there is no gasoline, no gas, and no diesel to be found. The peninsula is in the grip of a fuel firestorm, kilometer-long lines, panic, and despair. Nothing like this has ever happened before. The occupiers are sounding the alarm, but there are no solutions. Crimea is descending into chaos. All the details are in the report.
Whenever they try to prove that everything is under control, reality reminds them in the harshest way possible. Just imagine, even those in Crimea who were staunch supporters of Putin's bloody regime just yesterday are starting to panic. And it all started with gasoline.
The fact is, part of the plant in this case is physically not operating. We have encountered problems and disruptions with fuel.
As a result, fuel disappeared from the shelves, prices shot up, and sales began to be rationed with coupons. For the residents of the peninsula, this struck at the very heart of their daily lives. When the familiar rhythm collapses, so does the belief in stability. It was a gasoline that triggered a whole wave of hysteria.
Lining up for gasoline. Damn it. For crying out loud.
So, at the special Atan gas station, there's absolutely no gasoline available in the entire city at all. Only diesel fuel is currently available. Night.
Outrage is growing on social media. Users are writing about shortages, about life becoming increasingly difficult. And what's notable is that many of them are former supporters of the authorities, once loud voices in support of Moscow. Now, those same voices sound different, filled with anxiety, irritation, and more often, open disappointment.
Naturally, they are furiously and vociferously trying to make their profound outrage heard clearly and unequivocally at the very top of the organization. Like, do something, you have to do something. What is the army for? What is air defense for? You need to act.
Officials are trying to keep the situation under control. They turn on the usual pressure mechanisms, propaganda, reassuring statements. But when panic is at the core, even the strongest structures collapse. In the occupied Crimea, people no longer believe in the word stability, and panic is growing, along with distrust toward those who promised order.
I am in direct contact with all federal services. The situation is objective. I ask Crimeans and guests of the peninsula to be patient. The situation is forced by objective reasons.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian intelligence has gained access to the servers of Crimean administrations. Hundreds of terabytes of data could reveal management schemes and connections in the occupied territories. This blow coincided with the fuel crisis and intensified the sense that the situation is getting out of control. And all this is happening against the backdrop of serious pressure on the Russian economy, which can no longer withstand its previous load.
Due to the fact that the Russian Federation has been cut off from international markets since 2022, more than 25,000 sanctions have been imposed to date. The only resource the Russian Federation could count on was its internal reserves. They have been depleted.
At the everyday level, everyone feels the crisis. Standing in line for groceries, power and water outages, rising prices, every little thing adds to the sense of instability. The economic downturn in Russia itself makes such forecasts even gloomier.
Today, the Russian Federation is truly in a state of stagnation. And if you take into account that along with stagnation, it also has a rather high level of inflation, that is, rising consumer price indices, then all of this together is called stagflation. This is a very bad thing.
In Crimea today, they are talking about a crisis that they refused to acknowledge just yesterday. It all started with gasoline, a familiar everyday detail that turned out to be the trigger. It was precisely this that triggered the panic, which is now spreading ever wider. And the question is no longer when the critical point will be reached, but what will happen next once it is crossed.
At the moment, their deficit stands at 4.5 trillion Russian rubles. In the annual budget, the planned deficit level was set at 3.8. Russia has developed a hole in its finances and it's unclear how it will be covered. In other words, Putin will keep waging war until his population starts dying out due to mounting problems. He doesn't care.
Oh, so what happened to Putin's gasoline empire? The official version is as follows. Due to scheduled maintenance at the condensate refinery, Moscow will receive about 13,000 tons less fuel in October. That's the monthly consumption volume for a region with a population of nearly 1 million people, an entire Russian region the size of Smolensk. Amid simultaneous maintenance at the Russian Tomahawk refinery, the supply gap is only widening. And now the truth that the Kremlin can no longer hide. The fuel crisis in Russia is gaining momentum and is even approaching the capitals. The Kremlin is in a panic. The Ukrainian armed forces are striking oil refineries and railways, which is worsening the fuel situation in the swamps. Russia is already in a deep gasoline collapse. Panic is growing. This is not just a blow, it's the beginning of an energy catastrophe and the decline of the Kremlin. All the details are coming up next.
Russia, long nicknamed the gas station, has suddenly been left without gasoline. What once seemed unthinkable is now reality. In the regions, gas stations are closing one after another, the boards display empty lines, and there are queues at the pumps. Independent networks are disappearing, major ones are holding on, but even there it's increasingly hard to find regular gasoline or even diesel.
All Orthodox cell are done.
In Russia, the fuel crisis, strikes by Ukrainian drones have destroyed a significant part of the oil refining system.
In a country that for decades lived off selling oil and fuel, today there is simply nothing to fill up your car with. At first the shortage hit the provinces, but now it has come right up to Moscow.
Previously, Ukraine targeted plants with a capacity of about 6 to 7 million tons of oil refining per year. And to understand just how painful the strike on the Kremlin refinery is, you need to mentally multiply that by 3. This plant is 3 times more powerful than those Ukraine had previously put out of commission.
How did this happen? It's very simple. The authorities decided that gasoline is needed not for the people, but for the war. Billions of dollars are being spent on missiles that are launched at Ukrainian cities. Russian oil refineries, the country's main fuel kitchens, have become legitimate targets for benevolent drones. And they arrive, they burn, the tanks are shut down, workshops stop, logistics collapse. What was once considered a safety margin turned out to be just a facade.
And the pump. What about it? Yeah, it's flying. It's worth as much as our house.
But we're not on the trajectory.
Repair work, fuel shortages and supply disruptions. This is now the reality for ordinary Russians. Delays reach up to a month and a half, and in some places, the fuel simply never arrives. And if before the gas station country supplied half the world, now it can't even refuel its own regions.
Just a typical situation at a gas station. And now over the loudspeaker, they said the fuel is running out, don't wait in line. Just imagine that whole line won't get any fuel. Dear families, this fuel is running out.
And here's the picture. More expensive gasoline, kilometer-long lines, and growing dependence on a few large companies. Small gas stations are dying out, there's no competition, prices keep rising, and the consumer is left hostage.
Naturally, they're furious. So, of course, they are absolutely trying to get their profound outrage across to the relevant authorities, like, please do something immediately about this pressing issue. You have to do something. What is the army for? What is air defense for? You need to do something.
Of course, you could believe the words of the Minister of Energy, who promises to adjust the repairs at the TNPZ and keep price increases within inflation. But can you really still believe these words? While the minister is talking on air, people are driving from gas station to gas station in search of at least a couple of liters.
Everyone is waiting for some gasoline, but apparently there isn't any.
No, it's for myself. I don't even have enough gasoline myself. I'm just standing here.
These temporary difficulties are a direct consequence of the war. Russia is spending resources to destroy a neighboring country while it's falling apart from within. When drones hit factories, it's no longer just a news headline. This is the reality that everyone sees, from Siberia to the Volga region and from Kuban to the center of the country.
This isn't the end yet. Here they all are, just standing.
The irony is that for decades, the Kremlin blackmailed the world with oil and gas, and now it's facing its own weapon. Fuel has become scarce at home, and this is only the beginning. If the situation doesn't change, Moscow itself risks ending up in the very position it once took pride in, waiting in line at an empty fuel pump.
That's how it is, friends. Today, this is already the 4th gas station, not even on the main highway, where I tried to fill up with 95-octane gasoline. There wasn't any at all. I hope this is just a temporary situation.
Experts emphasize that Russia, often called a gas station country by the world, is now experiencing a fuel crisis. Kazakhstan has shut off the valve. Domestic refineries are suffering from drone attacks and breakdowns, and the consequences for the Russian economy are only just beginning to show. It seems that Kazakhstan is skillfully outmaneuvering Russia on the political front as well. Let me remind you that recently on the sidelines of the UN General Assembly, the president of Ukraine met with the president of Kazakhstan. And oh my, they talked about peace. Such a scenario is clearly not to Putin's liking.
He met with the president of Kazakhstan, Tokayev. Right now, the key task is to achieve a just and lasting peace with reliable security guarantees. They discussed in detail the efforts of Ukraine, the US, Europe, and other partners around the world to end this war and stop the killing. They also touched separately on issues of trade and economic cooperation, as well as the interest of Kazakhstani companies in participating in the reconstruction of Ukraine. I thank Kazakhstan for supporting the sovereignty and territorial integrity of Ukraine.
Then once again, Zelensky added fuel to the fire. The president of Ukraine stated that Putin had been offered negotiations at the leaders' level, even in Kazakhstan.
Trump's teams, my team, the Europeans, including Macron and other leaders, and the president of Turkey. I know that President Erdogan was in Europe. We all proposed a meeting in Turkey, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, in Europe, in neutral countries such as Austria or Switzerland. We said, even if you want somewhere like Kazakhstan, we are ready. Tense music.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine today. Join us now.
But it seems that even here, Putin was not satisfied. The Kremlin is disrupting the negotiations, although the reason may be something entirely different. For example, there are the Agavkas, which could soon be flying toward Moscow. Trump made a sensational decision. Moreover, Putin is losing his grip. Moldova said no to the Kremlin. Sandu crushed the pro-Russian forces. On top of that, Europe is building a nuclear shield. No one expected this. Watch all the hottest details right now.
Russia refuses to negotiate even with Trump. This is now being stated aggressively even in the US. Jay Divens called on Russia to wake up and accept reality.
We have been actively seeking peace since the very beginning of the administration, but the Russians need to wake up and accept reality. A lot of people are dying. They have nothing to be proud of. How many more people are they willing to lose? How many more people are they ready to kill for so little? If there is even any military advantage on the ground at all. I think and I hope that the answer is not that many.
The US Vice President also confirmed that the White House is discussing the potential provision of Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. It is known that earlier, during a meeting with Trump in New York, Volodymyr Zelensky discussed the transfer of these missiles.
The final decision on this issue will be made by the President. The President will proceed based on what best serves the interests of the United States of America. This is precisely the guiding principle in both his foreign and defense policy. And we will apply the same principle when responding to questions about the Tomahawk. I will leave it to the President to speak for himself, but I know that right now we are having discussions on this issue.
Meanwhile, the special representative of the US President even stated that Ukraine can carry out long-range strikes on Russia, since Trump himself does not prohibit it.
I think
that after reading what Trump said and what Vice President Vance and Secretary Rubio said, the answer is yes. Use the capability to carry out deep strikes. There are no untouchable targets.
Meanwhile, as Russia continues to destabilize the situation, Europe is now considering developing nuclear weapons. Poland has even proposed to host weapons on its territory. And now Sweden is even talking about developing new ones. But so far, it's only at the debate stage.
The more significant escalation there is from the Russian Federation, the more numerous countries will inevitably try to find effective ways to ensure their own national security, specifically through the development and possession of nuclear weapons. Moreover, I firmly believe that this significant and impactful trend will inevitably spread its influence not only to all the member countries of the European Union, encompassing its diverse nations and economies, but also extensively throughout the entire world, reaching every continent and affecting countless populations across the globe.
Russian drones and fighter jets continue to test their luck almost every day by entering alliance countries, causing internal disagreements both among NATO members and between the US and Europe as a whole.
So far, Putin has managed to demonstrate to Europe, to NATO, and specifically to the European part of NATO, their weakness, thereby distancing the United States from providing that very security umbrella, which the United States, under the Yalta-Potsdam World Order, had assumed responsibility for to ensure Europe's counter-security.
Nevertheless, Europe is increasingly transforming itself into a military power, but at the same time does not want to raise the likelihood of a full-scale war and is seeking to find a balance of deterrence with the Russian leadership.
There is already information circulating that even within the framework of NATO commitments, the United States does not plan, for example, to deploy its contingents in the future in countries that are in dangerously close proximity to the borders of the Russian Federation. This, of course, means that, in essence, Europe is very likely to be left to fend for itself when it comes to its own defense.
How much effort did the Kremlin put in? But it failed in the parliamentary elections in Moldova. Maya Sandu's party received twice as many votes as the pro-Russian party organized by Russia.
Now, if we look at the political aspect, Moldova has received, let's say, full legality and legitimacy for its pro-European direction. This is important because right now, if Maya Sandu has the political will, it will be easiest to resolve the issue with Transnistria. In other words, this means restoring Moldova's subjectivity and essentially its territorial integrity.
For Ukraine, the key point remains that Moldova will continue to follow a friendly and understandable course for Kiev. At the very least, it has been possible to avoid the emergence of yet another hotspot of instability on the country's borders.
And what do you think about these events? We look forward to your comments. Stay tuned for the most important updates and don't forget to like. Wishing you peaceful skies above. Subtitle editor Ai Boykova.